Hey everyone, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. I know a lot of people are following the developing situation in Israel, and we are following on this channel as well in our Discord. But I will still be focusing mostly on Ukraine, and while we'll be following the developments in Israel, we will not be really covering it in details on this channel, at least not in details that we cover Ukrainian situation, because Ukrainian situation is definitely developing, and it's developing in a expected but good areas. First things first is what is happening in the north here, because finally, what a lot of time has been supposedly rumored about Russians starting another wave of offensives has begun, as we can say. Russians have started attacking the same directions that they were attacking before, which is the Liman direction, which is the Kupiansk direction, and which is, yeah, I don't know, there is no kind of big area here to refer to, but this direction as well. And we actually know what is happening in those directions. First, around direction of Liman, here heavy battles are happening in the forest. Russians have tried attacking but didn't get through, and Ukrainians are holding their positions strongly. Around Sinkivka, Russians have tried attacking again, and Sinkivka right now is a big fortification for Ukrainians, because the same way as Russians were building fortifications, Ukrainians on this direction have also built fortifications, and Russians cannot really advance from the north without taking Sinkivka. So until there is any specific reports for the battles inside of Sinkivka, then we definitely can say that this direction, pretty much this whole line over here, is fine and stable. It's very strong fortified area, and it's all good. But the biggest kind of things that happened on this area, there was a little bit of a success for Russians, but it was mostly them taking over some of the gray area, and I need to refer to that, which is to the east of Makiyivka, which is over here. And that is all fine, and Ukrainians right now are counterattacking in that area. But the biggest thing happened exactly the same place where when Russians tried attacking last time, they used a 30 tank armored force, armored fist, that they really tried pushing through this area around Novoyehorivka. This time, they didn't make it like a full-blown tank fist, but they still used a lot of armor in this area, and they still used a lot of units. And they got crushed. The reports are incredible. The report says that over 2 days that Russians have been attacking here, they've been losing over 30 armored vehicles for sure, and the number of casualties they're sustaining is enormous. So basically in this area, not only Russians were not successful in attacking, but they also got their teeth caved in with a nice and strong blow from the armed forces of Ukraine. Which brings us to the old discussion that we already had. Russia might still attack Ukraine in these directions and continue attacking. I've been telling you about this. And some people saying, like, but you were saying in other times that Russia has been moving around their reinforcements, so how come they're also attacking on this direction? And the answer is simple. What I meant is that Russia is not able to effectively attack. What they're doing right now is, if you can put it in a perspective, we like box analogies on this channel. So technically speaking, I can challenge a world heavyweight box champion, and without going too much in details, technically there is a possibility that we can get on the ring and it can be counted as an official match or anything like that. However, when it gets to the actual effective fighting, it's going to become very clear once we get into that combat that the forces of me and the world heavyweight champion are not the same. So Russian officers can indeed look at their forces, say, well, I mean, this looks okay, and they can now go attack Ukrainian positions, and they will go and attack Ukrainian positions. But the effectiveness of that attack, let's just say, it's questionable. So when I say that Russia cannot attack, what I mean that it can effectively attack, that it would actually change significantly the battlefield, because Ukrainians here are well prepared, they know, and additional reinforcements have been sent in the area prior. Importantly, I also discussed a lot about the fact that Ukraine can trade resources for time. So, for example, if there is some kind of decision by Ukrainian command said, okay, we can give away some land, but we can use some of the reinforcements from this area to help us in the southern direction, then potentially there will be less Ukrainian forces in the area to defend, and then Russia will have local advantage in this specific area. However, right now, it doesn't seem that Ukraine is drawing forces from the area, so I think there is plenty of resources and forces that are here defending the area, so we should be quite calm in with regards to Russia attacking this. But I would still advise you, if you see any kind of taking of territories by Russians, don't panic, it's fine. Around Bakhmut, Ukrainians were able to cross the railways, and right now they're holding a little bit of a bridgehead here behind the railways. I've covered this on my community tab. The Russians tried to dislodge that bridgehead or I don't know, beachhead, whatever. Like basically that a little bit of a part of territory that Ukrainians are controlling beyond the railways, but Russians are attacking it quite heavily and trying to push Ukrainians back over the railway. But generally speaking, right now there are intense battles. Russia is trying to control. We've heard that some forces have been rotated out, and now some of the new forces are rotated in. Right now there is battle around Bakhmut, but nothing that suggests any kind of fast changes in the area. There are also fighting that are happening around Marinka and Avdiivka, but I'm gonna get back to it in just a second, because we have around Robotyne. I've reported last time that during this week that Ukrainians have taken these north part of Novoprokopivka, where Russians were having a strong fortified positions, and now Ukrainians have taken it over, and now they have a very strong position to dig themselves into, and Ukrainians are now pushing Russians back on their on the western flank. So the reports are every day that Ukrainians are expanding their western flank towards Kopany. Importantly, we've talked about what I think about this offensive and so on. And I explained to you that we've seen Ukraine concentrating their resources very, very specifically on very few direction, which is here and pretty much it. And then there is like around Bakhmut and so on. So what this tells me is that Russia knows where Ukraine is attacking. So while Russia is out of their dedicated resources in the back, Russians can still look at the front line, and they can still rotate units from the other parts of front line to help reinforce the position around the main push of Ukrainian forces. That's why I don't expect any fast breakthroughs by Ukrainians. When we were discussing in the summer about potential breakthroughs, if you remember correctly, there was a push here, there was a push here, there was a push here, there was a push Ukrainians here, there was a push of Ukrainians here. All of that is over now, and the idea before was that Russia will just spread their resources too thin, and then Ukraine will find an opening. It is now over. Right now, Ukraine is just having like a proper bloody fight, main force to main force, and just slowly but surely moving 100 meters by 100 meters by 100 meters. It's not the best fighting tactic, but they're constantly putting pressure on the Russian forces, and I'm hoping that this is what we're going to see continuing. It doesn't mean that there is not a possibility for a collapse of the Russian front line. It definitely is, but I don't really right now see preconditions for it to happen in this main southern direction. What I see might be happening is that as Russia maybe fails in the north, as Russia will fails with the forces with the north, maybe Ukrainians will start counterattacking. As Russia will have more and more troubles around Bakhmut, and Ukrainians will start continuously pushing forward and forward, as Ukrainians are now counterattacking around Marinka and trying to retake some of the positions that Russians have been holding, I believe that with the efforts that Ukraine is putting on the southern front line, and some of the analysts say that this is also a possibility, that what we can happen is we can see maybe a local collapse of the front line in either of these directions. There is a higher probability for that, rather than potentially we will see something on the southern front line. However, Ukrainians are still reporting that they have a plan, but I talked extensively in my recent stream about what I think about Ukrainian messaging about this war and how they should communicate. So far, I will hold the expectations quite low. Additionally, Russians have been reporting that Ukrainians are amassing around the North Kherson area, and that around the 10th of October there's supposed to be a big breakthrough from Kherson. There is no conditions set for this. Ukrainians have been operating in this area mostly with the special operation forces. They've been doing raids into the enemy territory, abusing the fact that Russia has dedicated very weak resources into this area. And since then, they've mostly stopped. Ukraine still controls certain parts of the islands around Kherson. Mostly, the most famous one is this area around Antonovsky Bridge. But it's a very small area, nothing that can guarantee a solid landing. So if we suddenly imagine there's going to be a massive landing operation from the territory of Kherson, if I'm skeptical about a lot of things, then about this I'm skeptical super a lot. But you might ask, well, where then the special forces from Kherson went? And the answer is they went to Crimea. All of the successful things that we saw happening in Crimea, with Ukraine taking out Russian air defenses, then striking Russian assets deep inside Crimea, has caused a lot of problems for Russia. Most notably, Russians are continuously now taking their naval fleet and relocating it from Sevastopol to Novorossiysk, which is right over here at the eastern side. That is quite far away. So while these ships, they can still launch Kalibr missiles, they can still attack the territory of Ukraine, they don't control this part of the sea anymore. That's why Ukraine is happy that they got this big economic victory, and now they are slowly but surely finding more and more companies and countries that are very willing to trade directly with Odessa, with Russians not having a control over this part of the sea. And this just boosts economic conditions for Ukraine, which is amazing news. Additionally, with S-400 being destroyed in Crimea and some additional anti-air systems being destroyed in Crimea, Russians have been pulling in some additional anti-air assets. And while it's nice that they have been reinforced, the problem is a lot of those new anti-air assets that have been reported is actually the S-60 guns. These guns from 1940s. And the point is, you don't bring these up if you have your Tors or Panzers or Tunguskas or anything else that can fire at the drones or anything. These guns are archaic. So we can see that Ukrainian efforts at targeting Russian anti-air defense, that Ukrainian efforts of launching drones against the important targets inside of Russia, this all campaign is paying off. Russians are starting to have problems with allocation of air defense assets. So they are forced to now engage and trust in air defense assets which are not adequate to the modern conditions of warfare. Obviously, this thing is not there to fight Storm Shadow missiles, but maybe against low-flying drones or something like this, for sure. So all of this brings us to the situation. I want to be very clear. While I talk about problems of the Russians, while I talk about situation is being really bad for Russians, right now we are not in a stage of war where Russians are completely out of resources, they're going to be about to collapse and so on. Russians are also adapting, they're also trying to find allies. Even if it's North Korea, they will still provide certain number of shells. Just recently there were pictures where North Korea was sending over 70 wagons of different ammunition, most probably ammunition. So if we just put like 152, which is the main caliber of Russian artillery. If we put in all of those 70 wagons 152 millimeter shells, that's going to be at least a couple of 100,000 shells. Is it a lot? Not really, but it's still something. The point is, while what Russia right now is doing is still actions, while they're still wiggling around, squirming and trying to fight this heavyweight box champion that Ukraine is very consistently becoming, strengthening more and more their armed forces, getting more and more support from the Western powers, having more and more capabilities enabled with soon to be arriving and enabling F-16s. Ukraine is growing a lot of muscle, whereas Russia is basically running and begging for the terrorist organizations of the world to please donate something to them so they can try to survive. But right now we are in about equilibrium position where Ukraine has maybe a slight advantage, so that's why they're doing the offensive operations and Russian offensive capabilities are being degraded. But we are still a little bit far away from Russians collapsing. That's why I would advise everyone not to expect quick changes, not to expect any major collapses, not to expect major breakthroughs. We were hoping for it at the start of the year, mostly based around the Russian morale and hoping that the Russians would run. They didn't. They were able to consolidate it. So now it's about getting through the proper military channels to make sure that Ukraine defeats Russia in all of the places and will be able to enforce their positions and strength on Russians and get them out of the territory of Ukraine. Thank you so much for watching this, guys. Thank you so much for supporting Ukraine. Please check out the link in the description where we're gathering money for the truck to the armed forces of Ukraine. I love you all. Slava Ukraini, and I'll see you guys next time.